Night Pitch, episode 13. Justin Wick, Evan Johnson, our favorite guest, Jarod Bayless. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Jarod, we did it. We convinced you to come back for a second episode. How are you, my friend?
I'm great, man. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be on. I know it was a toss-up if I was going to be here. No, I'm kidding. I'd love to be here, so thank you.
It's all good, man. We are absolutely flattered. Of course, the main reason that we wanted to put this show together is we wanted to cultivate ambition and enthusiasm through the game of baseball, and we found the guy that could do us better than anybody else that we've had. That's not really better than anyone else we've had. He's the only one that we've had. There's a reason why he's the only one, because we want to set the precedent that everybody knows this is the guy that we're supposed to follow. So now that we can make it a little bit more organic, we've got the first episode out of the way, I suppose. We got everything moving. Jarod, you actually moved recently. You're back in business at the spring training facility. As you were mentioning, you're back in Peoria, Arizona. Can you tell us a little bit about what has transpired since the last time that you were on the program with us? It was mid-December. How's the last month been treating you?
Dude, it's been great. During that time period, I packed up everything in my house, put it into storage, kind of the season rite of passage. Season's getting ready to start, and now I've migrated to Peoria, Arizona, where I'm at, training at the Seattle Mariners Training Complex. So they got us running through a velo phase, so it's a lot of fun right now. Off season's really in the full swing, getting ready for the season. So it's pretty fun over here.
There you go. At least soaking up the fantastic weather. Meanwhile, Evan, you are putting in the hours. You're post-snowstorm in Iowa, is that right?
Yeah, just came down. It's just it's going to warm up tomorrow, and then we'll get a little bit of a melt. But it's not going to melt everything because there's a ton of snow. But we're doing all right.
There we go. We got a little bit of all the coordination all over the place. As we were putting together the call time for the program, it was funny to see that we were navigating 3 separate time zones as we were putting this episode together. So we're all over the place bringing it to the people, which is an absolute blast. So needless to say, the discussion point that we want to really dwell on this afternoon, this evening, or whatever time you're tuning into this program, we wanted to detail all of the. What time is it if you're watching? Goodness, somebody's probably watching this at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know, whatever. Anyways, a big thing that we wanted to talk about was what baseball means in the sense of, is it better to let this game take over your life, or is it better to have a difference? Is it better to separate it from who it is as your actual persona? So how I want to phrase this, and I will give Jarod the credit on this. He was the mind behind this particular thought. I can remember when I was a senior year in high school, I had somebody come up, one of my teachers, saying, never forget that baseball is what you do, but it doesn't define who you are. Which, at the moment, I'm an 18-year-old impressionable kid. Hearing that, you soak it up. I think that there is some validity to it. Jarod was talking about, is it better to have this almost separated, or is it better to embrace it as if you almost let this game take over your life and you just try to be one with the game itself? Is it easier to navigate the landscape? Is it easier to embrace the challenges that are in front of you? So this is going to take a very philosophical angle. And Jarod, your text message thread with us today actually worded this far better than I just explained it. But I want to turn this to you, talking about, letting this game kind of take over. And for so many different senses, maybe you separate the game versus your life, or in some cases, maybe you don't necessarily try to separate it. What do you believe? Is there a good balance, or are there good strategies to really go about it?
I like the way you said strategy, ultimately, because it's a way to process, what's happening to you, ultimately to get what you want. So it's like a strategy, like how can I view this? And there are different strategies that you may need to lean on. But just like your teacher told you, for the longest, I tried to keep it completely separate. Like I did not want to be defined as a baseball player. I wanted to have some individuality. I wanted to be me. I didn't want people to think, oh, Jarod, the baseball player, and that be the end of the thought. I wanted people to know me for who I was. So that led, that was like pretty much the predominant view of like, I'm going to cultivate myself outside of baseball while also cultivating and growing myself in baseball. And they kind of grew separately. And the text, I think it was like, should I let baseball be a separate part of me? Or should I let it just be a part of like who I am in general? So like now my answer to what your teacher said is, I think you should embrace it as part of you. Like if like who you are is, part of your history, like your past, like that shapes who you are now, like going forward. It doesn't define you, but it definitely like is a necessary part of the story, right? So I just kind of like chose to like, what would it be if I just embraced this completely? Because I kind of think it led to a lot of like, false dichotomies where it was like, am I balancing my time appropriately between non-baseball and baseball things? And that created like internal struggle, which is like needless. If you just view it as it's all your life and you're just completely invested in whatever it is at the moment, whether it be baseball or non-baseball things, like ultimately I think that's the most sustainable mindset that I've like came across. So I'm really trying to look at that and say, what is it? How can I embrace it? But then also it's allowed me to appreciate parts of the game that I otherwise just subconsciously kind of shrugged off because, sorry, for some reason, my laptop just pulled up the voice feature. I'm trying not to say her name. It starts with an S, an Apple product. It's an assistant that does everything you want. So I'm trying not to say that word again. But it allowed me to embrace parts of the game that otherwise, like whenever I kept them separate, and I didn't want to be a baseball player, I just took for granted like the certain aspects of baseball that I think are just frankly badass. Like they're pretty cool. Like, and I started to really appreciate the individuality of the game. Like I don't need to be ashamed of it. Like just unashamedly embrace it completely as a part of who I am. So
I think that's
reply,
I think it's fascinating when you really recognize how much of your day-to-day life is consumed thinking about the actions of whatever it is that you're passionate about. This transcends just baseball specifically, but I know, Evan, I remember seeing you, this was in early 2021, you were in spring training, and I remember just there was some particular evening, maybe you called me up or something, and you were talking about you and a couple teammates were hanging out, you went to dinner or something, or you're at somebody's hotel, whatever, and one of your teammates said something, for at least one day, can we not talk about baseball? Like it turned into, can we actually take a couple hours to not talk about this game? And then you kind of were laughing about it going, well, that's like what I want to do. Like, this is what we do. It's not just the actions of what it is. But do you think I think that this is sometimes kind of a misconception of there's a difference between who you are as a player and who you are as a fan or just an enthusiast of the game. Do you think that there's a really weird gray area between the two that you're able to separate them, or do you really think that they're sometimes just one and the same?
Yeah, I think it takes a balance, right? Because for the longest time, when I'm playing, when I'm younger, all the way up until now, like I've always identified with the fact that I'm a baseball player. That's what I wanted to do. That was my dream, and that's what I get to do. I get to play. So whenever I would go down to spring training, or be in that environment, it's like that's what I wanted to talk about. That's what I wanted to do because I was kind of consumed by it. But also, with that being said, there's definitely a point where that can become destructive, right? I remember in college, there was like I dedicated every single minute of like every waking hour of the day to trying to get better, and a lot of it was just eyewash. So I think it's important, to take it seriously. You can identify as a baseball player, but I have, and that's, identify and that's it, right? You have no other interests or whatever. But I think part of the reason why I get into other things is to take my mind off of it as something that I want to get into, even just because to me, you think about that so much. Like that's the main thing that you're trying to do. And however you balance that with regular life is just however healthy you're going to be for baseball and for regular life.
Yeah, I think, there's always an importance when you recognize, I feel like the word balance is almost so true that it becomes a cliche to a certain point. But I think that when you are so fascinated by the intricacies of the game itself, I'll just attest to my own self of wanting to start a show like this post-playing career. And when I was in school, I could remember I was sitting in a high school classroom and I decided I wanted to memorize every single team in alphabetical order. Or I'm going home and I'm keeping score of certain games and I'm checking all these different elements. I'm looking on Baseball Savant for all of this different data. I think that it developed a passion, but when I realized that I wanted to be the one that was on those lists, like I wanted to actually be the one that was learning the way I was learning about the game, I understood how that started to kind of potentially create like a roadblock in my mind of, there were teammates that I played with that you would ask them about notable big leaguers and they would have no clue who they are. Or if you'd say, name the 5 teams in the AL Central, they might not be able to do it just because they don't exactly know about those types of things. So, of course, us being just overall baseball nerds, and I assume that the majority of the listeners to this program being on a similar level, this is something that I think this ties in perfectly of if you separate your love for the game and you simply isolate the work that it is that you need to do, is it easier to go out and compete? Like if you grew up watching, I mean, of course, let's say you guys, of course, being in the Mariners organization, you are well familiar with T-Mobile Park. You've watched games with this, probably dating back to when you were a kid, and now you progress through the ranks realizing that's the pinnacle. As opposed to, let's say there's some hypothetical minor leaguer that's just in it because this is what they do. They view it as a job and they don't really see that a very strong baseball enthusiast is. Do you think that when you're able to separate, and maybe I hate to use the word strategy again, but if you're able to separate what it is as the fan versus what it is as the player, Aaron, I'll turn this to you first. And Evan, I'm curious to hear your sides on this as well. But what do you consider, is there a good way to separate those things of who you are as the fan versus who you are as the athlete? And is there a way to optimize what you can contribute as the athlete, even knowing how big of a fan you are?
I think I'm the perfect case study for this because, as you described, like not being able to name notable players in the league currently, or the 5 teams of the AL Central, like I'm the guy that's not going to be able to do it. So I'm on air. You can ask me any question you want, but no, I think it's interesting. Like I've never really considered the difference of enjoying the game for what it is as a player versus a fan and how they're different. I've never really considered that before until now. So I think as a player, the game, it gives you something else. It's your involvement with it is going to be just different than that of a fan. But that's what's so interesting to me is like before like this, being a fan of the game, like and learning all of those interesting facts and the history of the game was something that I may have shrugged off because of the young naivety. I thought I was, separating that and I was establishing myself as who I want to be and less of a baseball player. But, I think I can totally see how it could take you out of the moment. If you're like, say it's your first time pitching at Wrigley and you've always wanted to pitch there. You don't want to be caught in that moment of awe. So I totally get that. I guess in some way that gives me a slight advantage in that, I don't know the hitters I face. That's something that, I'm learning, I'm going to need to get better at. But I've just faced so many random hitters throughout my career that it doesn't, I don't know, it's hard to, spot that. But even teams, really it just kind of starts to blur together. I'm not saying, in a cold way that I view this as my job, but I definitely, I don't know, maybe it's the training and this is just what I happen to like. I don't know, but I can totally see there is a difference now, and I just need to think about that a little bit more.
I think this is a good time to point out your knowledge on the biomechanics world and what you know in the world of kinesiology. I would put that knowledge up against damn near anybody. And I said, please don't think that this was meant to be just a baseball specific side of things. I know this is something on our last episode when we had you on of talking about how do you differentiate between what you know as just a sports scientist and all the knowledge that you've developed and then hybridizing that with the actual act of being an athlete. So I think that there's different ways to put this together. Evan, we'll pull your side of this. Our last episode, we heard that when you were 9 or 10 years old, you had a scorebook inside a Busch Stadium when you were visiting. So for you, from this background and what you developed, you touched a little bit on your college career and what you would do just being continually involved. From your perspective, do you believe it's best to keep those separate, or maybe do you feel like those things can sometimes help you as an athlete too?
Like I said earlier, I think they can help and they can also hurt, right? Like Jarod said, if you're in Wrigley and you're starstruck because you're pitching in Wrigley, It's like, how focused are you on getting, John Doe out at the plate, right? I mean, but also at the same time, like, you can take an extreme example of this, like Brooks Koepka. Are either of you familiar with Brooks Koepka? He's a golfer.
But golfer, is that right?
Yeah, but he very, very publicly does not like golf, even though he's on the PGA Tour. like multiple times he's talking about how much like he just dislikes golf and he doesn't like being out there, but he does it like as his job. He makes a lot of money playing. He's really good at it. And to me, like, I just don't understand that concept, because if I'm not interested in something, if I don't really have a passion for it, I don't want to do it at all. Like, not at all. So that's kind of where I draw, motivation from. But I think that Bayless's passion for what he does and my passion for what I do are different. They're differently set with the same result, right? So I see Bayless as having a really good passion about training and working with his body and understanding pitching and just the overall experience, whereas my passion would be just with the game in general, or just being on the field, being there with the team, etc. So I think you can have two different ways to view it, but you can end up with the same result. Like somebody who really likes golf, or somebody like Brooks Koepka who really just doesn't care about golf.
It's the honorable way of seeing it. Well, that's funny too. And I mean, this is maybe not so much in a playing context, but I'll turn this into like a quick 20-second story. When I was growing up, it was routine that for spring break throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, my family and I, we would go down to Arizona. So I grew up in Colorado. We'd fly or we'd drive to Phoenix and we'd see different facilities. I can remember the first spring training game I went to was at Scottsdale Stadium, and it was where the Giants play. And that was continually a destination, a great facility. I still to this day absolutely love it there. I can remember when I first was hired on with a position with MLB, the league office, I was assigned to the Arizona Fall League, and this was when I was 24. So I can recall before the season got started, we were checking out some of the different venues, and I needed to drop something off at Scottsdale Stadium. Here we are. So I remember it was my first time actually on the field itself, and I didn't want to pull out my phone to take a picture because, I wanted to document it going, yeah, check this out. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Like, my fourth grade self is just through the moon. So I remember the familiarity with this versus, you put that season behind you. You have more seasons that come up. Long story short, I've probably been on that field hundreds of times now. And when I am, yes, there's always a part of me that's nostalgic on how much it meant, and it still does. But when the degree of normalcy starts to creep into your mind of when David Ortiz hits over 500 home runs, the act of having been there before over and over again is just so substantial in your mind that nothing really catches you off guard anymore because you've done it. I shouldn't say nothing. I mean, there's always going to be something new, but I think it's very easy for people to attest to this as a fan, because if you're able to walk into a venue and it becomes a normal part of your life, there's always something there of, there becomes a sense of normalcy. But when you're talking about the training side of things, of, realistically, you could always put more weight on the barbell, kind of. You can always gain more velocity, kind of. I think that there's less of a ceiling when it comes to actually player development, to where I can understand how this might take over your life when it's harder for those goals to sometimes become normal, because let's say if it's my goal to walk into Dodger Stadium and check that place out, I can do that. I could realistically make it normal if all I did was just spend money to go to games there. But I think the threshold of making it normal in a training setting is there's so many more possibilities, and their ceiling is a lot more difficult to attain in many respects. So, Jarod, I'm setting you up to ask hopefully not a very closed question, but when you're pursuing the developmental side of, let's call it the kinesiology pursuit of trying to figure out how do I get to the top of that ceiling, do you feel like you're almost chasing more of an illusion in that sense? Or do you feel like that's something that, because the ceiling can continue to get higher, that's something that you're always going to inevitably be chasing?
Is it like a finite goal that like I'm trying to reach? Like, there are checkpoints along the way, but it's kind of open-ended in that let's see how good I can get, and the barometer of that is the big leagues, like the test the litmus test, so to speak, is how good can you get? Is like, well, you can pitch in the big leagues, and that's pretty much as high as you can go, and then can you have success there? Like, that goal does get lost though. Like, I will say that for a lot of my career, like that goal was so far away that I don't think it would have done just to like continue to think about that. Like, there were like other things, you know, along the way that I had to do. Like, I need to have success at where I'm at in high. You know, I need to be good here. I need to get promoted to double A. You know, I need to get promoted to triple A. Like, there's all these things I need to get there before then. So, but as of recently, like, I've really tried to consider, like, man, what would it be like for T-Mobile to be like your home field, like to be in the big league, like, and to really consider that, and to let that kind of like stir me up. So, like, we talked about how early, like, balancing call it exercise science aspect of the game, or, you know, like a childhood like adornment with the game, or whatever it is, you know. I think these are just different wells of water, so to speak, that you can go to fill yourself up with when you need motivation. And so, like, really, it's becoming more of something that, like, I'm considering and, like, finding strength in. It's like the reality of, like, what would it be like to actually pitch in the big leagues and to reach that goal. So, like, I'm definitely drawing on that as well. So it feels like a finite goal, but I know the goal isn't just to make it. It's to stay there and to pitch there, you know, to make it sustainable. Like, it's not enough, like, I feel like a lot of times when we're trying to really go for something, it's like, we're going to give it our best effort, and we're going to really go outside of ourselves to just reach up and get it. But if I feel like at some point you're kind of admitting that that's outside your means, that's not sustainable for you to, like, maintain that degree of effort. So it's like, how efficient can I make this thing? And we've already kind of touched on these themes of, like, is baseball a part of me? Is it a separate part of me? Is it my identity, or is it a part of my identity? And I think that's, like, the experiment of, like, how good can I get is realizing that these other aspects make you better at the game. Like, being a better person, like we talked about in the last episode, is one of the biggest unlocks you can make, like, on the field. And, like, realizing that, like, Evan in college, whenever he devoted every minute of his waking hour to baseball, ultimately may not have been the best thing for his baseball career.
No.
But yeah, like, I don't know, it's this balance of, like, finding those wells to, like, draw that energy from, and to keep you motivated to keep going after it. But, like, definitely one of the number one, like, motivators, I guess, is just, like, everyone dreams of pitching in the big leagues, and, you know, and hopefully not getting rocked in the process.
I think I want to touch on,
you know, I like that. Yeah, go ahead.
What Bayless said, I think it was perfect. Being efficient about it and making it sustainable, right? Like, that was perfect. How you're talking about, like, let's say you're trying to set some kind of record, and you just give it 100% everything you got just to touch that record, right? And then after that, it's like, how do you recoup and do that again? It's like, practice now to be efficient and sustainable in your personal life and in your baseball life, so that when that does hit, you can make it sustainable. And I think that was a great point from Bayless.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Yeah, when you recognize the amount of tie-in that goes into, you don't need to blur the lines into saying this is very compartmentalized, like the scalable degrees of what goes into it. Jarod, I didn't mean to cut you off. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's, like, one of those things where your future self would thank you for doing it. It's like, if you go well outside your means to do your best to get there, but you're going outside your means, like, it's not something you can continue, then, like, well, you've created a hell of a problem for your future self now. Because he's got to figure out how to do something. But then also, like, just to make this more baseball specific, it's kind of my hot take is there's good to training. I'm going to preface this with, like, there's good to paying someone to train you and training in a baseball culture. But my hot take is, do you really throw 95 if it took you 8 weeks to build up and a velocity phase, managing your stress perfectly to just hit 95? Like, do you really throw 95 if you can't display that in a season randomly when you're called on to throw out of the bullpen.
And
So
it's
when
rainy
you say,
and
"Yeah, I throw
cold and
90 miles,"
crappy out.
so it's like you're admitting that like you can only do it when it takes you 2 months to plan for it. It's not something that you could just display on any given day. And obviously, you can't throw every day. You're not going to be able to. So like it dies down a little bit, the validity of it. But that's kind of like the same logic extrapolated down into like, or it condensed down into a very specific baseball analogy.
So the quest at my end of career to finally hit 90 miles an hour doesn't count. That's what I just learned right there. There we go. No, I'm just playing. I did get there, but I mean, that's funny you say that because I can remember that was the quest of I knew that my end of my career, I need to throw harder. I need to do this. But I mean, it wasn't, I would get into game situations and it wasn't repeatable all the time. So, I mean, I'll use my own experience to just completely attest what you had said. And this was, it's the humble pill to swallow in the immediacy. I have at least had a couple of years of closure to kind of embrace that and recognize it. And I don't want to talk about my playing career too much because, of course, we want to highlight yours a lot more than that. But I think that it's fun to really put all of these things together, and I think that it's fun to see Evan really fired up to add something right here. What do you got, man?
I want to back you up for a second, Lick, using something that Bayless had said and back up what your decision was to go after 90.
Turn this into the hour of justifying me, though.
Because
like, no, I want to make this about you guys.
Bayless had mentioned this too, and it'll back you up. So there's certain checkpoints you have to hit throughout your career. Like you have to be better, and you have to get on your college team when you have to play. You have to be a big contributor to go on to the next college team if you went JUCO like you did. And then at that school, you have to play and contribute to move on and pass that checkpoint. And sometimes you're a little bit behind and you need to hit the gas a little bit to get to that checkpoint at least, right? So it's not like this isn't sustainable but you're like right there. You have like this much time to get to where you need to go. You have to do something like that. So just to back up your choice a little bit there too. Just wanted to back you up.
No, I'm flattered. I did not mean to turn that into personal justification, but by all means, I am honored right there, man. This is pretty full circle. I know we started off touching on, I mean, what is it as far as, separating or compartmentalizing your life of, am I the baseball player and the human being? And at what point do those things really cross in? I'll kind of close with this, and then I'll give you guys the forum to say whatever you want to say here, too, of so many things are scalable. Jarod, I'm kind of twisting what you said in the last episode, but, I mean, I understand in my day-to-day life, I don't throw anymore. I mean, I still sometimes do, but those things that I learned along the way, they were so scalable to set me up to where I am now, and I think about all of the different actions. They continue to paint the picture of who we are and the purpose for why we're ultimately here. And, believing that we are here for a reason, we're here to fulfill a mission that's bigger than any of us can even fathom. I think that when we see this through the lens of the game of baseball, and when you recognize how poetic this game is to actually help us paint this picture, it's far more complicated than any of us can really understand. But I think that if you choose to view it as this is just what makes us one, this is what makes us whole, this is what we do, but this is the avenue that we can just celebrate the life that we've been given, I think that's a pretty honorable way of seeing it. And I think that's the main reason that we wanted to put this show together right there, man. So that's what we're all here to do. So, Jarod, I don't want to close this without, if you got a final thought for us, I'll let you cap this one off if you'd like.
I mean, I think like a base goal of mine, like this is a belief that I have, and it could be wrong, it could be right. I don't know. I'll put it out there, but I believe that human beings have a superpower, and whenever we put our full, undivided awareness and attention into something, they tend to grow. Be it like where you place your attention, you kind of give life to it. And I think that if you're reserving a part of your attention, your awareness, because you don't want it to be a part of who you are, whatever it is, you're not going to get that return out of it. You're training yourself to not give 100% of your being. You're going to receive less from that. So, it's not just a baseball thing. I just happen to play baseball, and for me, that looks like giving 100% of myself, like when I'm playing baseball, to baseball. But when I'm not, then trying to have that same level of awareness, intensity, and being, and all those aspects. So that's what I got.
That's money. We just need to roll right into the break after that. This guy knows what he's talking about. Human beings got a superpower. There we go. We're talking about commitment. We've got the guy to tell us the story right here, man. My friends, thank you very much for being here. This is episode 13 of The Night Pitch. If you're just tuning in, first of all, if you're just tuning in, rewind to the beginning because Jarod Bayless has some tremendous nuggets that we've been given right there. But make sure you stick around. Part 2 of episode 13 coming up next. We'll be right back. The magic number in baseball. This is a number that shows how close a team is to clinching something big in the regular season. Very pertinent to where we are here in the Major League Baseball season. Here's a prime example in the American League East. Let's take the top 2 teams in 2023 with just a few days left in the regular season. In this situation, we have only about a week left in regular season play. The magic number for the Baltimore Orioles to win the American League East division is getting pretty small, which is a good thing for the Orioles. With every Baltimore win, their magic number to win the AL East decreases by 1. With every loss by their next closest opponent, the Tampa Bay Rays, that number will also decrease by 1. Once the magic number hits 0, that would signal the Orioles have clinched the American League East division title. Now this is calculated by taking into account 3 numbers, and that is total games played, wins by the leading team, and losses by the closest competitor. Magic numbers can apply for division titles, or you can even use it for wildcard races, or if you take the inverse, you could even use it to show the race for MLB draft order. The magic number comes from a very simple calculation. The way the number changes is very simple, and it helps make a team's end-of-year race that much easier to understand. Welcome back to The Night Pitch, second half of episode 13. Of course, joined alongside Jarod Bayless. Evan Johnson's along for the ride as well. We capped off the first part of the episode talking about all of the different details that go into, your life as a baseball player. How do you potentially unify those things of what you do as a player versus what you do as a human? Do you keep it separate? Do you keep it together? And that led into, we wanted to detail the support systems that really do exist within the game. When you hear the phrase, it takes an army, in many respects, it does take an army. But when you look at, who are the people that are there the most, who are the people that you're the most vulnerable in front of, and who are the ones that give you the support that you ultimately need to continue to persevere? And more often than not, for a lot of married players out there, that's the significant other. It could be the person that you're dating. It could be potentially a rotating platform of people that you're interested in. There's a lot of different ways that players go about this, but anyways, I felt like from a wholesome perspective, we have a very good panel to discuss this. Of course, he's currently married. You mentioned that you and your girl have been together, is that 10 years? Is that right?
Yeah, almost 10 years.
That's well done, first and foremost. There you go, man. I know I've been together with my girl, I think we're going on about 6 years. And Evan, you've put several years behind you between you and Bailey as well. So, of course, we are very much leaning into the committed relationship perspective of this, which if we were to have a very whole panel, maybe we would have somebody that's single or somebody that's maybe not as fortunate to have a significant other like the 3 of us, of course. But, I want to detail this. Jarod, I'll kind of let you start on this as far as, if you rewind the clock 10 years, it's funny because you and her have been together through a significant amount of trials and tests and successes through your career. Is it possible, can you see it any other way? Maybe this isn't a fair question when I say, how has this impacted your career? Because, maybe you don't exactly know any better, which is a really cool thing to be able to say. But, just from a collective standpoint, and I'll just kind of keep this open-ended, how has that helped you throughout your career and your life as a whole, having somebody that you can continue to turn to for that long?
Man, it's a blessing to have, your best friend, like someone you've committed to spending the rest of your life with. We're married now. We've been married for 3 years. So stretching on that, but we've been together for a while. So all through college, all through Pro Bowl. The only season in Pro Bowl she hasn't traveled with me was my first year in 2019. But she's been with me almost every game since then. I will say every game. Maybe not the games that I know I'm not going to pitch. She's probably going to take the day off. But man, I want to put the focus on having someone that is willing. We know what a minor league season is and what it looks like, and there's a lot of traveling, and it's every day, regardless of the holiday. If it's a big one during the summer, you bet your butt you're playing, and it's probably going to be a packed show because it's July 4th or something like that.
Of course, that's the show. There you go.
She's tagging along with me, trading in her summer. to be at the stadium with me, and to see that display of, devotion and commitment. It talk about an energy source for like getting your goals. Like, I want to, make good on those commitments as well. But just having someone there that can be with you through the best games, through the worst games, and all of them in between. Not because of it's your best game, because it's your worst game, but just because like of you. Man, that is the biggest comfort. And like, I think it's cheat codes, honestly, guys. Like, go find you a good person and keep them around, because it's talk about like improving your game or enjoying the game more, as more related to this show. Like, definitely enjoy the game more when you have someone who's so into you like that. But also, I just want to say, we talked about special people like our partners, wives, girlfriends, but also before the minor leagues got the overhaul with the last, collective bargaining agreement, Quality of Life took a big tip. Before that, there was an agency called Adopt a Minor Leaguer.
That's right.
And,
yeah.
So if you signed up with them, they would connect you with a random person in the country. It could be near the town you were playing, but they would literally just show up and give you Chipotle gift cards or Venmo you for groceries. So it does take an army. It takes people that aren't even in your family, that are just big fans of the team, that like really hold us up and make this sustainable, because it's tough being white. So I just want to throw that out.
That's the honorable way of seeing it too, as far as, this isn't just specifically to who you're in a relationship with. It's a collective. I mean, there are times in my own career that I've called Evan in similar respects of just who do you really go to when you need an energy source. And I think that when you have somebody that's a staple in your life that you can continue to gravitate towards, and I think at the same time of realizing, this is somebody that you can call family for the rest of your life, I think that that's one of the most untapped reserves of energy sources for players that maybe haven't had that before. And I don't want to kind of put a bad seed in people, because you can't rush this kind of thing. Like, if you rush into it with the wrong person, maybe all of a sudden that's going to be the energy that you don't exactly need, which a lot of different case studies out there on this one, I suppose. But I think the cool side about this, and Jarod, I think something really admirable about your story is you're talking about this was established while you were in college, and it's persevered all the way through 10 years of, you'll hear other stories about maybe people that they're drafted into the NBA or the NFL, and they find out what the signing bonus is going to be, and somebody might be chasing other ulterior motives. Maybe other players are actually valuing that, and that's something that they want to put an emphasis on. But I think that when you twist it in such a sincere and a heartfelt approach of, you're not exactly using your status to secure what it is that you need, but you're using who you are as a person. And I think that there's an important jurisdiction of, we started off talking in the first half of the episode, your life as a player versus your life as a human. I think in this particular instance, it's important to recognize that, yes, if you strip baseball away from this, is this still somebody that's going to be uplifted by your presence? Are you going to be uplifted by them if you take away what it is that you do? And I think that kind of breathes life into this is what you do, but it's not who you are. Well, maybe that's not entirely true, but in a relationship context, it's amazing to see the different twists that can come into this. So, Evan, I'll draw you into this one. I know you met Bailey, your current girlfriend, when you were playing in Everett. I mean, I know she's from Washington, and I want to touch on, the story about what your life was like leading up to that point in time, and then what it was like, because you met her while you were in the thick of the minor league season. Can you kind of detail what was kind of maybe a shift in perspective, or what was that boost when you realized this was somebody that you really liked being around?
Well, it was somebody that I could trust, and see as family, who was local, right? Whereas like most of the time that I've been in the minor leagues, I haven't been anywhere near home. There's been nobody that's been out to that far away to go to games and stuff, just because a lot of my family's working. They have stuff to do. Well, they'll listen to all the games and stuff like that. But one of the funny things is when I first was meeting Bailey, she had expressed to me that she really, really, really liked to travel. And I said, that is like, perfect. Yes. We're going to go everywhere together.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that's like that's kind of yeah. When you're talking about character traits, yeah. If that sealed the deal, don't tell her that. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there were other
No, I did
characteristics
not.
of her life that's gonna won it over.
Correct. No,
You know, I think that this is.
she's
No,
awesome.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
She's awesome, and it's a great support system, and I think that this is important for people who are maybe in a situation or a relationship where it doesn't seem that supportive of each other, and how to find one that is supportive is Bailey doesn't need to be my girlfriend. She doesn't. That's not something she needs. It's something she chooses to do, just like I choose to be with her, right? So what you're talking about with, let's say it's a first round draft pick in the NFL, and you have, people chasing money or whatever it is. It's like that's not the healthy relationship that's very supportive. And that goes a long way in your career. When even if you pitch bad, or you're stuck in some little town in the middle of nowhere, and you're on a whatever day road trip and you haven't seen him in like 2-3 months, it's like, well, that person still chooses you and you still choose them, and that's where you get the like solid support and trust that's really helpful for your game, no matter what's going on.
There's going to be some unwavering loyalty when you realize that this is, I mean, it's a mutual partnership, but it's a mutual decision that this is what goes into it. I don't mean to talk too much on my own experiences. I've, of course, been with my girl, Lauren, on about 6 years. We met, Evan, I remember we were living together when Lauren and I met, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And I remember trying to figure out, like, you're a Division I athlete at a school that there aren't many of them. You have at least some degree of status, albeit kind of a local stance. But I remember trying to really rationalize. I didn't want somebody to pick me because of the status. Like, I wanted somebody to pick me because of who I was as a human. So when I first met Lauren, I was actually throwing, funny enough. Speaking of divine intervention, I think there's another line on that one. But I can recall I was coming back from Tommy John surgery. And I had just pitched in my first game back from surgery 3 days before her and I met. And so she kind of loosely knew our student manager. Shout out to Sal. Evan knows who Sal is. Sal was on the radar gun, just hanging out. And she went over and sat next to Sal the first game that she saw me pitch. And my elbow is not where it needs to be. I am hurting. Like, my mechanics are well out of whack. I'm kind of ashamed to share the number. My first 3 fastballs were 79 miles an hour in a Division I baseball game. So, like, let it be known, I'm glad that I did say earlier on that I did certainly elevate. This was not normal. We're coming back from injury. First 2 games back, it was not good for your boy here. So I am fully convinced that after the game, after she's sitting right next to the guy holding the gun, I threw the slowest pitches in the game by far. And I am, like, kind of humiliated about this, going, how do I justify this? But I think when I was almost afraid about the sense of, I didn't want to have somebody just because I was vulnerable at that point in my career. I wanted it to kind of be, I'm sustaining myself, I'm persevering. I finally had that boost of I'm pitching in games again, and then she came along. So, Jarod, I want to tie in your particular story on this, because with 10 years of being with who you've been with, the transitionary phases within your life, I kind of touched on what it was like me coming out of Tommy John surgery and having somebody right there. But when you look at, through college, you go away and play summer ball, and then you come back, you get drafted, you go to a distant city, you're maybe not really close to home like you've used to be. You growing up in the South and then going up to, playing in Everett, Washington, that's a pretty big jump from where you've been. So I want to touch on, what it means to have somebody in those transitionary times in particular, when your life maybe picks up and moves immediately. Is that something, what is the boost that comes to you in those periods of big change that can happen pretty quickly in the professional baseball world?
Thankfully, these are all things that, like, I hoped to experience. In high school, I hoped to experience what would it be like to go, play in college and travel, through the Midwest and play all these teams, or whatever it was, to have to fly on a plane to go play these other schools. Like, I've always wondered what that would be like. So I was always really excited for that. But also what comes with that is, you have to spend time away from your family now. You haven't had to do that. So it's kind of like, I never, those things hit you like, oh, you also have to like reconcile that as well. And then when you're engaged, and then, you get shipped off to your affiliate, and then you're gone during that period. Like, what is that like? Like, goodness, a lot of FaceTime. The data minutes for sure went up those months. But lots of FaceTime. But now it's considering, it's not just me that whenever like we leave for the season, like it's a combined effort. Like me and my wife, we moved into a house for the off season. Thankfully, my family was able to give us or allow us to stay at for an undisclosed lease term, because that's part of the deal that comes with this whole thing, is you don't know how long you're going to be somewhere. So we were living in this house for less than 30 days. So within less than 30 days of moving into it, we unpacked everything and put it into storage. So like that doesn't just impact it. Like her sense of like home base is just as defined as mine is, which is everywhere. Like we're nomads. We kind of have this running joke where whenever we come home from like an affiliate, we say like home with a question mark, like this is home. And then when we get back for the off season, it's like a statement, like home.
Yeah.
Like embrace it. Like honestly, you just kind of have to take it for what it is. Every day's new, and I guess you kind of learn like what really matters. Like we're with each other, and now we're with each other, and we have our dog. So like, like we have our family there, and we can make home be wherever home is, so to speak.
Yeah, that's an honorable way of framing this, and I think that's an important thing to point out, especially for maybe any young players that are there. Of how cool is it to fly to different cities to play? You're in a college team, you're with your entire squad, and you go pack up and you're going all over the country. That's a really cool thing to do. But at the same time, I can recall thinking back when I was in college, I was on an airplane, whatever, it's 5 o'clock in the morning and you're taking off, and I'm thinking, how cool would it be if this was just the same travel as high school? Of your entire family's at every single game. You get in the car and you drive 20 minutes or an hour or wherever, and you're just there. But I mean, it's always the kind of thing that you look so much to what's ahead that sometimes when you get to what's ahead, it's not that it isn't cool. And I mean, it's still really cool to do those things. But when you recognize that the higher up you get, it's a very simple kind of concept of the higher up you climb the ladder, the less players there are that compete at that level, which means you get to travel farther to go and play those teams. So I think it's something that's almost, it's easy to overlook that, even though it's kind of a simple degree of understanding. But when you see the entire lifestyle shifts that come with it, and that ties into the recurring theme of it's very difficult to compartmentalize who you are as a baseball person and who you are as a human being, because these are huge lifestyle things that come into play. Evan, I want to put in here, your girl actually knows where home is in many respects, and it happened to be the location of an affiliate. Did that come with any weird kind of nuance, or was that just something that happened to be a good kind of condition of the circumstance?
Well, that was just where I was. That's just where we met, and it was weird because when it was, we had finally started to get really acclimated to each other, and a couple months went by, and then I got hurt, and I was like, okay, in 4 days, I got to go live here for the next, year or more.
Next year. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, and she's just kind of like,
Now I get rolling.
yeah, she was so like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, yeah, I leave in like 2 days. I'm going to be gone in like 2 days. And it was such a shock because she had never really
like travel, like you said. Yeah, that's what you got to lead in.
Yeah, and see, like Hannah has been introduced to that since you've been playing, right? Whereas like Bailey, she had never been anybody like me before, and it was just like gone. Like, what are we gonna do? So, good support system. She rents her place and comes and stays with me for that time, and we had an amazing time. And that is like, for somebody to just go through all the hoops that it takes to do that, that's how you know it's a good support system.
That's a good point. Yeah, but you can feel some validation on you're doing the right thing if somebody's actually going to follow you like that. Sure.
But yeah, then eventually it just turns into, okay, we're, like Jarod said, nomads. but it's very fun to do that. It's not a bad thing. It's really not. Like a lot. I feel like if your partner's excited about it and it's fun to see all these new places and go on an adventure, and then think about all the stories you had to tell your kids, Jarod. Think about that. Think about all the stories, all the places you lived, all the places you know. You're like, oh yeah, we're going here. I've been over here before. They're like, when, Dad? They're like, oh, I've been here like 6 times for like a couple weeks at a time.
I think like baseball, like I know I love how you said like Hannah was like slowly introduced to it, and she actually worked at the AA affiliate for the Rangers whenever we were, I guess it was right before we were engaged. So she got a little dosing of like what could minor leagues be like. She worked as a graphic designer and photographer for the Rough Riders. So she was, hey, what's my schedule? It's every day there, and it's till 11 p.m. So she quickly like got the schedule down, and she also got to hang out with around the dugout to like see what is it actually like to if I just got drafted at this point in time, so like I'm learning what it's like and she's learning what it's like in 2 different places, but it's so cool to see that. But it's also, I just wanted to say, baseball kind of breeds this mentality of like you just kind of have to like roll with it. Like you could be displaced from Washington to Arizona, and one text message and 12 hours later you're halfway across the country. I remember hearing stories in 2019. The Mariners had a Washington affiliate and then one way over in West Virginia, and guys would get the phone call in the 6th inning, hey, you're going to West Virginia. And it's like, okay, like when? They're like, go up and pack everything you have now, like you're leaving at 9 p.m.
That was me. We were at
this was before you met Bailey, though, right?
Yes. No, this was 2019. This was we were in Spokane, and it was me, Reed, Austin Shenton, and some, I can't remember. There's one other, but yeah, it was Carson Vitale was filling in for manager, and he came up and he said, "Hey, you guys are going to West Virginia, but you have to leave. Like your plane leaves in like 2 hours." And it took us all night to get there, and we landed at like noon the next day in West Virginia. We played right away.
That's just part of it. Like baseball, like I don't know, like if other sports are like that, obviously, because I haven't played basketball past high school, past my sophomore year of high school or college or football, But I don't know, like baseball just kind of breeds this like you just have to roll with it and like embrace it because it's crazy and it's relentless and it's every day, all summer. Like it doesn't stop. You just kind of have to roll with it.
I think that's part of the fun of just letting something completely consume who you are. And I think about when you fully immerse yourself into just the quest of being great in something. Like when you let that really take over your life and you realize that, this isn't just taking over your life of your day-to-day living hours. I think about how boring, apologies to anybody that maybe just has a 9-to-5 job. I guess sometimes I kind of do. How boring that can actually be after you've been through the minor league grind of, yes, it's nice to have normalcy. It's nice to come home. I'm sure, especially for people that have families, you're able to spend the evening with your kids. There's some invaluable qualities there. But I think about the mystery involved with, and I think this is especially true for players that maybe are in a transitionary phase of they just got released or they kind of see that they're at their end of their actual playing career. All of a sudden, the norms and the lifestyle that's been established and then being taken completely out of it. Like sometimes you kind of miss the unpredictability that comes with being all over the place and not knowing when you're going to need to be at the next place specifically. So I think that really speaks well to what it really takes to be a tremendous partner that's along for the ride. And when you recognize that there's somebody that's been able to roll with the punches alongside with you, I think that, this may be kind of biased, but when I recognize that some of the stronger relationships that I know of, oftentimes it's people that have been through these types of trials. It's people that understand that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be a lot of unknown. And this could very well end up being that maybe this is too bold of a statement and too overgeneral, but sometimes I think the strongest relationships that I've seen are ones that have been through, the tests like Jarod and Evan in many respects. So I don't want to sound really close-minded with that because then I realized almost everybody that I interact with is a baseball person anyways. So I don't actually know if that's completely true because I don't really know a whole lot of people outside the game, but I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And I hope that this doesn't sound kind of pompous like we're trying to promote ourselves, but do you think that there's a degree of all of these tests, does it lead to almost across the board relationships for anybody? And Evan, you can start with this if you like. Do you think that there's some degree of relevancy across the board that when you're through these trials in the baseball world, does it ultimately lead to collectively as like a whole strong relationships for everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It's going to put a test on the relationship in a way that I would guess only like the military can. Because you don't control where you go. You can't control where you are.
Yeah.
There's no way it's not going to test it for the better, right? It's like lifting weights. You stress it and break it down to make it stronger. unless you're not lifting the weight that you really can't handle, then you're going to get stronger and you're going to be better at dealing with it. I'm sure Bayless would probably say the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think ultimately, this is kind of what I talk about is like if you are separating baseball from who you are, you're going to miss out on this lesson. Like if you're trying to like view like baseball as this and it's only like tactical skills, like I need to throw 93 and I need to sweep this pitch and I need to throw more strikes and 2-0 counts or whatnot, then you're going to miss out on the gains, or so to speak, the gains that the game of baseball can teach you. And this is kind of like what I've learned to really embrace is that all of these obstacles and challenges that baseball gives you, like with living, like it ultimately like refines you. It should change you. Like it should change you. And if it doesn't, then like maybe that's the issue. Like you're lifting weight that's not gonna change you. Like you were just saying, I love that analogy. But yeah,
I think that's one of the coolest ways to frame this of if you try to separate it, you miss out on the lesson. Like I wanted to pause you for a minute just to make sure that people understood how monumental that truly is.
And like that made you a better person. And then you become an equipped person to handle these problems. And then you pair another equipped person who's going through the same things you are and is also like faced the same challenge, learn sort of the same lessons, you know, like that's just like even more empowering. Like the stability of that becomes more sustainable, I guess you could say.
Well, I have an example as well where like it impacts both parties, where you'll be playing and you're like, oh man, so and so got traded, and then I go ahead and tell my girlfriend that somebody got traded, and she's now good friends with the other. And she's like, dang it. So I don't get to talk to her anymore? I'm like, they're traded.
Yeah.
It just gets all somber. Well, I mean, I think it's funny too when you recognize that we get so wrapped up in, I mean, sometimes the logistical navigations of what it means to be the best player that you can be. And when you view things in such a binary, is this going to help or is this going to hurt my career? I think that, having the right support system to actually frame the message, I mean, it's a superpower to have in many respects when you realize that, having somebody there to put things into context. And, I'll self-identify as sometimes one of the most indecisive people that I know, which I don't praise myself on that whatsoever. But I think of having somebody else to bounce ideas off of, having somebody to feel grounded with, these are the actions that I feel I need to fulfill of, even, sure, they probably give tremendous advice, but even beyond that of if there's even just an ounce of validation for who it is that you are, that's kind of a guiding principle of you're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing this to serve a lot greater purpose than just the ulterior motive of how far you want to take this. So, this is why we wanted Jarod on to discuss this, because you put 10 years of a relationship together, which means you're proven like a master at these types of things, and the insight that you can put together. I mean, I can remember when we were coming up with just, different ideas for the show or different things that we really wanted to discuss. I wanted to save this topic for somebody with your background, somebody that can really attest to that, and somebody that can, really speak on terms of this is something that's a really beneficial thing. So I'll twist this to discuss just the recency. I know you opened up the episode talking about you moving to Arizona. You got your dog with you. You're in Phoenix at this point. Well, how has it been? I mean, let's just kind of talk about the immediacy of the recent move and having her along for the ride. How has that been?
Oh, dude, it's great. Like having her here makes, the transition period of just being able to like relax and being like, this is your home. I know like we joke about this being home ? But being able to come home, like when I get done with this, we're going to go cook some dinner and we're either going to watch Game of Thrones or Harry Potter because we've been binging it. But like, it's just able to kind of like decompress easier. And I'm going to get nerdy here. I'm going to cite a study that I've heard passed around. And it was with Olympian athletes, they were trying to see what was the differentiating factor between guys who consistently placed on the top 3 in the podium and who finished in the top 10 but never really made the podium. And it was the people who were able to relax the most when not training were the ones who were consistently in the podium. So it's like, then you start to consider like, it isn't like baseball should be my entire identity. Like it should be all of this. And if these aren't getting the appropriate balance they need, then like it takes away from this in a tangible way. So it's like, you talk about skill of like just binary, like what can I get out of it? But it's like, I'm a better baseball player by having her here. It makes me like tangibly, like, I can make that correlation. So it helps me, decompress, relax, let your guard down, like the social aspect of being a social creature, I guess.
We're getting like complex into the study side of things. I mean, there's a lot more value behind that study than just this, but that's a big deal right there, man. Evan, I'll give you kind of the last word. You actually got a visitor that came to see you in Iowa. How has it been? She fell into a snowbank. I saw that on not fell in. You kind of encouraged her to fall into the snowbank on your Instagram story. Just kind of detail you being where you've been and having her along for the ride over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, it's been good. And of course she likes to travel. So we're seeing each other a lot in the off season, even though we're not living together. Right. I got to see her through the rehab experience, which is really, really, really helpful. I don't think that it would have been, because I look back on that experience and it was a great life experience. It's weird to say, but like I'm happy for that opportunity to be able to do that. Right? As much as injury sucks, it's like you learn a lot from that scenario. You learn a lot, and I got to really get to know her very well. And I mean, I couldn't be more grateful for that. Even though it sucks because you got injured, it's still there's so many positives that come from that, and it's been a blessing. All of minor league baseball, all of my friends that I've gained from that, and the relationships that I'm able to build. It's honestly a blessing.
It's amazing to see how all of this continues to get put together. And if I can give a selfish plug for the show, it's amazing to see how the show comes together when you got such bright minds that are willing to share such good stories right there, man. An absolute honor. Of course, Evan, you being the routine staple as the co-host, thank you for being along for the ride. And Jarod Bayless, you can see the social tags on the bottom left side of your screen. You can see him come to a ball field near you with the season getting rolling. So, Jarod, my friend, an absolute blessing to have you aboard. Thank you for returning yet again. It's been a blast. Thank you, my brother.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
This has been Night Pitch episode 13. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Justin Wick. We'll see you guys next time.